Well, yeah, I've come through the ether. Hello, hello. Well, we're here again. Again? What are we doing? So, yes, it's our 7 p.m. Wednesday slot, but we've changed it up again. There's a lot of news out there, so we're going to get on with it. We're going to be heart of the matter tonight, really getting to the nitty gritty. So there's just me and Gary on tonight to really have a good look at the evidence. So it's like a saloon, but on turbocharged. So we've got a barrage of news at the moment from different people and different sources. The overall pattern makes me wonder if Doctor Who has an identity crisis. Who and what is he? Showrunners and actors seem to be saying things I had not expected or that challenge my perception of the Doctor. So, going by our first thing here, let me just show you. Matt Smith finding fan debate troubling. Sylvester saying the show was always political. Russell Davies talking again in October issue of SFX, and a strange tweet about the Rogue episode and the Doctor's character. And of course, there's David Tennant being referred to by the Tory leader candidate. We won't bother with that one, don't worry. So tonight, I will be ably supported by Gary Retrodoc to get to our hearts of the matter. You see what I'm doing there? So quickly, you know the score by now. Give us a like, help our metrics, yeah? Give us a subscription if you haven't already. You know it makes sense. And finally, DM me on X at Censosphere or email at censosphere@gmail.com. That's the way to go. That makes a lot of sense. So you've come here for a reason, to get to the heart of the matter. So let's get Gary on to do that. So hello, Gary.
Hello. Great to be with you, Brendan, as always. I'll tell you, though, some of these stories, though, challenge your mental strength to see if you can kind of hold it together in the face of all of some of the stuff that's coming. I'm thinking like sometimes you feel like that Jean-Luc Picard in that Next Gen episode where he was captured by the Cardassians and going, there are 4 lights, trying to, it's like, can you mentally hold it together in the face of all this assault of stuff?
And that's how I felt. I just thought, sometimes you think, didn't I do a Sunday show saying no more RTD for a while, and then he opens his gob again? I just can't keep up with this. So of course we're here to deliver. It's the SFX magazine for October issue, which is out now. Right. So we will be referring to that and many other sources, folks. But we're going to start on this straight away, and I mean to get onto it. So let's go straight in, Gary. We've got an example here. Where he let me get it right. I think it jumped there. There you go. So let me go bigger first of all, and on this one from the October SFX interview, we were talking about the Dot and Bubble final scene and why he wrote Dot and Bubble, and obviously he refers to this great final scene dealing with the racism and all the rest of it, and so I think that the whole of Dot and Bubble, because he was going to write it 10 or so years ago, and then he says, well, it was written as it was now because of having Ncuti, and thanks to him for allowing that story and portraying it so magnificently in that final scene, which is the performance of a lifetime. I think it's the Doctor of a lifetime.
Well, it's a performance I actually never want to see again in my lifetime. Maybe that's what he was talking about.
Well, this is what I mean, and the show is called, the Doctor's Identity Crisis, and I'm sat there reading this, and I'm not passively reading stuff anymore, but I'm thinking, the Doctor of a lifetime. I'm sorry, but that was one of my problematic scenes of the series. The Doctor spitting venom, offering white supremacists a new planet to ruin. What sort of Doctor Who is this?
Well, I will say that, in preparation for our stream today, I did actually read all 3 parts for the first time of RTD's interview. You've covered it, some of them, his comments on past streams, but I read part 1, 2, and 3 today, which was, I'm amazed I was able to get through it. But the one thing you notice if you read all these 3 parts, and it's classic RTD, nothing is just fine. Nothing is just solid, words which kind of are grounded. Every performance is either brilliant or magnificent or unprecedented or astonishing or the greatest. He doesn't think in like normal terms. Everything can't just be good or like here. Now he portrayed it so magnificently. Now, Brendan, am I wrong in saying? Don't I remember you saying that that was the first scene that he ever filmed? Right?
Yes, yes.
Was that so? In his first scene, he comes out a performance of a lifetime in his very first scene, the doctor of a lifetime, which is laughable. Yeah, all he does is sit there and kind of, I mean, maybe that was his first crying. Maybe that's why it was so astonishing, because it was his first real cry as the doctor. But I mean, there was that scene was so. Here's the thing, the scene of him as the doctor reacting like that way. If you look at it in the context of this is supposedly, not that I really believe that he's the doctor, but this is supposedly a character who's been around the universe and back about 1,000 times. He's lived a millennium, seen pretty much everything, but yet this causes him to break down. Like, this is the first time he's ever seen, people with, racist tendencies or whatever. So first of all, his reaction, this performance of a lifetime, doesn't even really fit with the supposed experience of the character that he's playing.
And then, of course, the second paragraph, he does go into why he did this scene. Sadly, I will admit that this final scene should have been a problem with every doctor. Well, nobody said it wasn't. I mean, every doctor will have seen the racism going on and dealt with it, and shouldn't have to be the doctor's role to inherit stories of that weight. Nonetheless, it came very naturally from a lot of conversations. Oh, I can imagine them, can't you, Gary? Bad Wolf sitting down with Disney going, oh, we could do a story about racism because we've got a black actor. Oh, hey. Oh, do you know, we could do a story about a trans actor now because we've got a... Honestly, you can just see how they're just ticking. So basically, I'm disappointed in a way that they've gone straight for it. I would have thought if you're going to deal with racism, the whole story is about it.
Well, first of all, I mean, didn't we have the Capaldi episode back in the Victorian times?
Yes.
Kind of touched on this.
Yeah, something. Yes, yeah, I know.
But the problem where he says, now it's funny. I think the question that this was the response to was kind of asking him about like the doctor's reaction, and this is the only time in all of the Gesundheit, in all of the 3-part interview where I thought that RTD was immediately getting what felt like really prickly and defensive. Was in the answer to this question. I mean, you could tell in his answer, because he starts thinking, well, where he says that, everyone says, like, what's this going to be like when he goes back into history? And RTD, I don't know what he's thinking, saying, well, what on earth are you talking about? Because the character is now black, he would normally face reactions that the other white doctors, let's be frank, even Jodie wouldn't. I mean, Jodie faced in a couple of her episodes reactions from people because she was a woman in her historical situations. But for RTD to think that the doctor wouldn't face, I mean, I don't know what he's trying to say here. Is he's trying to say that every doctor, even all the classic doctors, would have gotten the same reaction from these racist characters? No, they wouldn't, because they weren't black. The way that scene was set up is these characters, were reacting to him in the final scene because he was black. That was the point. It was kind of a sledgehammer point. But for RTD to say, well, any of the doctors would have, played that scene exactly. No, because that scene wouldn't have happened with the other doctors. So I don't really know what he's trying to say.
And it's too basic. This tick boxing thing is, we've got a black actor, so we'll do an issue about how he faces racism. But every doctor has dealt with unfairness, injustice.
Yes.
As Raymond Williams says, you know, here about the racism, look at every Dalek story. Look at the original Dalek story. You're dealing with the Khalids, you're dealing with people who want purity of the race. Doctor Who has always been dealing with racism. It's just it hasn't been whacked on your head by a sledgehammer from the giggle. That's all.
Well, before it was always the case, especially in Classic Who, that the message was there as a subtle underpinning of the story. It was in service to the story. Now, since we're basically in Wonderland where everything's inverted, whatever story there happens to be is always in service to the message. And you're never going to get quality, entertaining stories when that's the case.
And why does it make you better that you suddenly say, we're going to do a story about racism now because we've got a black actor? That is so basic, and it's actually, aren't we supposed to be all colorblind? Yes, I agree that if you've got a black doctor for the first time, I dare say you could craft a story where he faces ridiculous racism. You know, you land him somewhere on Earth in the past. It's easy, but just to plonk it at the end of a Doctor Light episode is cheap. And yes, his first scene is just spitting venom, and apparently it's the so basically is RTD saying that Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor's gone downhill since his first ever scene because that was his best scene.
Yeah, but if you pointed out that obvious discrepancy to RTD, he would probably come back and say something like, well, every scene he does is astonishing.
Yeah, of course. So the next little thing, because the SFX October magazine, we've read it for you. Sometimes I write it in. Now, this is the emotion. And the question was about the tears that the 15th Doctor does an awful lot. And he says, well, sometimes I write it in. Actually, I wrote it less and less because Ncuti would rather I didn't. I bet he wouldn't. He would much rather he feels his way through it. I don't want to put words in his mouth. It's very largely his choice, and I love it. I adore it. I tell you what, Gary, I remember doing a few saloons where RTD tells us that every word he crafts and no actor should ever change any of his word choices. And here he says, I don't actually want to put words in his mouth. I want him to organically grow as a doctor. Isn't this weird? To kind of be so standoffish suddenly as if he's got no real opinions on this one.
This is the man who, as you just said, apparently at one point he said he agonized until 3 a.m. about whether he should use yet instead of still. But then later on, he says, well, he watches the rushes at the end of every day, and then based on what those are, will rewrite himself. And so it's like, you don't know what to believe with this guy anymore.
No. And I have to say, does this sound like either diplomacy? Ncuti would rather it wasn't written into the script. Is that somebody saying, leave it to me? I don't want to keep crying, if you don't mind. I'll do it if I think it's necessary, boss. I find it really funny.
So Brenda, let me ask you, what do you think? So in light of this, does that mean that we got that all of the crying we saw in pretty much every episode, but maybe 1 or 2 this season, was that because RTD didn't put the directions in there and that was Ncuti's choice to cry, or that it was RTD in the script saying cry here?
You see, this is it. You can have it both ways, can't you? Because RTD says there, doesn't he? Sometimes I write it in. Actually, it was less and less because Ncuti would rather I didn't. So I'm looking at it. Apart from Dot and Bubble was filmed first for him. In Legend of Ruby Sunday, he was down in the dumps. He was crying in the TARDIS. He was paralyzed with indecision and hitting walls and all the rest. This must be all Ncuti's decision making then.
So I guess so. In the finale, the collapsing against the wall, and being the paralyzed with fear, that was Ncuti's choice. Okay, well, good choice then, Ncuti.
Yeah,
okay.
Brilliant. So I mean, the thread's on fire as usual. Lovely friends here. My name,
Charlie. I agree with you. It is a mental challenge to get through all 3 parts. I will say though, Brenda, before we get to the next quote, when I got done with reading these, I thought to myself, because there was just solid gold of unbelievability in all three parts of this interview.
Yeah.
But I got out of it thinking to myself that if someone were to write a master's thesis about why RTD is absolutely unqualified to be running Doctor Who, this three-part interview would be the only citation they'd need.
Yeah.
Because it's all here. I mean, every single point, every single disqualifier for RTD currently running Doctor Who is present in this three-part interview. By the way, anybody who does write that thesis about why RTD is unqualified, please send me a copy. I'd love to read it.
And we've got more coming. You don't have to go and get the magazine. We've got more coming on what Disney thinks, the ratings. It's all there. It's all there. Raymond Williams, good to see you. The more I hear from RTD, the more I feel he hired his crush, an old man making a fool of himself. The trouble is, Raymond, I fought back on these opinions early doors, as you know. But I have to say, and I'm trying still to resist it, but you know, it does sound as though he's been more swayed by this actor than any other blooming actor he wrote for. I don't think Chris Eccleston was allowed to change scripts. I don't think David Tennant was allowed to change scripts. And also, I don't think they had much choice about how they did it. I think if they were crying a lot, I'm trying to think of the Chris Eccleston Doctor who, you know, he was suffering from the Time War. Right. But he just went a bit mystic, didn't he? Went a bit kind of quiet and a bit pensive.
I'm sure that the phrase "whatever you want, Ncuti" was heard quite often during the filming of these episodes.
Yeah, and as Lee Smith says, and Lee, I'm going to come onto this with a few slides in a moment. Why has Equity not pulled RTD2 for handing parts out without auditions? There's a lot of cronyism that we found in. Yeah, here, we'll keep going. We'll keep going. Okay. So on this one, the emotional, we've all talked about the emotional Doctor. Now, the tears were mentioned earlier, but in this one, he says, when an actor feels that happy and relaxed and open and confident and true, I think what he means is he's gay. He's openly gay. Those 5 words all just, I think it's code. That he knows who he is and he's being what he is. Then there's no way I'd even drop a slightest line, not a note. Wow. In fact, the only line we give is just keep doing it, baby. Keep doing what you feel happy with. This is magnificent. And as you said earlier, Gary, this doesn't seem to be even mature professional language, even in the media lovey world.
I mean, it's like, I mean, you know, in some of those like, you know, old style Hollywood movies, like from the 30s or 40s, you know, where they take place in a studio and the director's going, cut, magnificent, you know, and even then it's kind of, you know, humorous and stuff. But I think what's telling is when he says a doctor who's more emotional, who expresses his emotions more, which this season apparently translated just to crying, which shows that RTD has a really weird idea about all the different ways that it's possible for males to express their emotions. He seems to think that's only in crying. That's a whole other issue. But when he says that's particularly appealing to a young audience. So, okay. So basically, is Russell saying that he's stumbled on the magic formula of a doctor that appeals to a young audience? Oh, I guess then it was just sheer luck that in the 60 years before that, where it was a doctor who wasn't necessarily overly emotional and crying and freezing and emoting and all of that, where that was part of his character, where he was kind of an unknowable alien, but that was the appeal. That seemed to me that appealed to a young audience just fine for 60 years. That was the base of the show, but apparently Russell came along with his magic formula of the emotions and the crying, and that's actually what's going to appeal to a young audience. Okay.
And I've got a few notes I'm going to mention later where I really do think. Well, no, I'll come to it. There's no good promising. We'll keep going. There's a. And
I guess the doctor is more emotional. I guess the more emotions include being like hot for Rogue in that episode. That was, I guess, a certain kind of emotion. but that was appealing to a young audience, I guess. All right, well,
Yeah, well, I don't know what sort of young audience he's thinking about as a
yeah.
as a teacher, and you've been a teacher, problematic in the extreme. But this whole thing about the emotional doctor getting bogged down in emotions, what came first, the chicken or the egg? This, because it makes me start in hindsight to look at what happened in The Giggle with the bi generation and then the 14th Doctor having emotional problems and needing rehab. Was that a line thrown in once they saw this amazing Ncuti audition who's going to be very emotional? So he thought, right, okay, we need to kind of break the 14th Doctor so that this person's given free reign. So
You're exactly right. If you look at the dialogue in that in the scenes after the bi-generation, where all of a sudden the 14th Doctor is like collapsing on his shoulder. He needs a hug. And then so Ncuti can comfort him. And then they get in the TARDIS later, and don't they say something like, I haven't rewatched it, but something like, basically he's saying, look, you need therapy, you need help, at the very least you need downtime, you just need to go and fix whatever's wrong with you. I'm from your future, so I'm evidence that you have been fixed, right? Or he says something like that.
Yeah.
That I'm the fixed version of you. So yeah, so you're right. So immediately saying that after Ncuti arrives, that 14 is now damaged, but Ncuti is the better Doctor. He's the whole Doctor, whereas 14 is the broken one.
And I think you see, I think the world's going to go a bit wrong here. I mean, when you teach, and the article, by the way, everybody, he does discuss mental health and he does discuss all this. And obviously, because he's a media lovey and hasn't had to spend time 30 years teaching kids or anything, he's just genius and worked it all out. That what you give kids who are getting bullied, having difficult times emotionally, what you do is you have a teacher who cries. You have a teacher who is indecisive. You have a teacher at the front of the class who's fragile. I mean, honestly, what is the sense of that? What you want is somebody who listens. What you want is somebody who has advice. What you want is to show somebody who says, I have been through that. You tend to do this. Not some. I have to say, he doesn't know how to teach kids and he doesn't know how to help kids. He just is going to tell us without any research or anything. And so I think we need an emotional doctor, which, as I've done in my analogy, so you need an emotional teacher at the front of the class. So
exactly.
when I teach about the slave trade, you want me crying. When I talk about, oh, and this character dies at the end of the play, and I'll be blubbing. What?
I mean, yeah, no, you're exactly right. So clearly what RTD, I think, seems to be saying, and please, correct me if you think this is a misinterpretation, is that he thinks that he needs to have a doctor that kids can, I guess that he thinks that a doctor who's like on their level, on their level emotionally, on their level reaction wise, as opposed to a doctor that they can take inspiration from, a doctor that maybe like calls them to grow and to constantly evolve and be better, a doctor that can provide counsel and wisdom and comfort and protection, whatever they need. No, RTD seems to think they need a doctor who is on their level, who is in many ways is just as much a kid as they are, with similar emotions, similar reactions to situations, and for some reason he thinks that's what is appealing to a young audience. As you just said, that's wrong in about a dozen different ways.
Yeah, and remember that if this is a social experiment, this 61-year-old Doctor Who program, for the first 60 years, those children, I mean, remember, we who watched Doctor Who over the first 60 years, we might have had angst, anxiety, emotional moments. I think we're all humans. I think we did. Now, we had a doctor who was above the fray. We had a doctor who sometimes came across a little bit more cold because he saw the bigger picture.
Mhm.
We that seemed to help us. We saw another way of doing it. I have to say, as an ex-head of year, when I saw in The Legend of Ruby Sunday, Ncuti's doctor thumping the wall in anger and frustration, that's not what I want the kids to see, because it doesn't solve anything. Plus, you normally smash you know, I have kids in my office who wanted to nut the wall, who wanted to punch the wall. You tend to hurt yourself even more. It doesn't solve anything.
Yeah, and then, I mean, admittedly, it gave Mel a great scene where she basically is the one to come up to the doctor and say, "Hey, basically, get your ass together, get up, and let's go deal with this." You know, which is a very doctorish reaction, but it was great for her. But again, you're right. Who was it? Uh, Somebody in the chat, and we are looking at the chat, by the way, everybody in the
Yeah,
chat,
yeah.
even though we're just kind of, Brenda and I are talking to each other. Somebody in the chat said that that RTD wants to have a victim doctor, which
Oh,
I
yes,
think there's
my
a lot.
name
I
is
think there's a
Charlie.
lot of. I think there's a lot of validity to that.
Well, when you've run out of ideas, when you've run out of stories to tell, you suddenly go, "Oh my God, isn't this genius?" We'll come to this, by the way. He explains what Doctor Who is now, but it's genius because you just have an emotional doctor, and so suddenly you can tell almost the same Doctor Who stories as the first 60 years, but you'll have a different way of doing it. It's genius if you want to be lazy. I've just got Over the Overseer here. Hello. Emotional kids need strong, supportive adults to make them feel
There you
safe.
go. Exactly. That was in one line what I was trying to kind of, you know, say myself before. It's like somebody who can provide, you know, support, a foundation, kind of like an oasis in the midst of the chaos of life to make them feel safe. Obviously, yeah, that's exactly it. But RTD seems to think that what kids need is basically a peer in a bigger body, basically somebody who's just like them, only who's
A
in
man baby.
an adult.
Well, we've
Yeah,
we've had
and
Doctor Who. Doctor Who was Space Jesus. Now he's a man baby. So now we've got Raymond Williams. You say he does the analogy, so we make the same point. Had John Pertwee cried every episode, I would have switched off. His doctor made me feel safe, exactly, and
Yep.
that no matter how scary things got, he would save the day. I'm in the middle of watching Death of the Daleks now. Can I, you know, they were drugged by the Exelons. They were going to be sacrificed. I mean, what did I want? My doctor punching walls and going, "Oh God," you
And
know.
I'm sorry, I forgot who was the little
Oh,
character that
Bilal,
who got
Bilal.
Bilal. Basically, that's very much like a child-parent relationship,
Yeah.
because you know she's guiding Pertwee along, but Pertwee provides that kind of protection for her. That's that image right there, and you grabbed a great episode as an example, is kind of kids could put themselves in. They could watch Bilal and they could identify with Bilal, but then they know that the doctor's there to protect and help them. Exactly.
Now we've got somebody I've not seen your name before, so welcome, welcome, one and
Hello,
all.
Dalek One.
Hopefully, you don't want to exterminate us,
Welcome.
Dalek Eye. How would an alien thousands of years old? Oh, you're going to ask a hard question, aren't you, Dalek, of RTD here, and can basically not die, be in any intimate relationship?
Yeah.
They would have to deal with thousands of losses and heartbreak. Well, it's because he's turned on, I think, is the answer. Basically, it makes no sense, does it, Dalek Eye? It makes no sense, and I think that's why we all hated the episode. And we're going to mention it. Okay, let's keep moving. You know, the article that keeps giving. Now, at this point, let me just remember what it was. Oh, yes, we were talking about the simple stories. Now, get this, everybody. Obviously, me and Gary have read this. We have a show. Oh, yes, the ratings. Oh, whoa, whoa. Lovely, lovely, lovely. I don't know how many shows I did on the ratings. You were in on them, Gary. I mean, honestly, we've talked the ratings. Anyway, he thinks there's no problem with the ratings. And he's
Well,
saying,
we should also for context, Brendan, wasn't there a line where he said basically the people at Disney and the BBC were doing what seemed like cartwheels down the hall
yeah.
because the ratings were so spectacular?
To be honest, the way he described that now and the way he explains it here, I start to think it's a bit more like me in the early days of when I started YouTubing. That, you know, you keep checking YouTube every day and 5 more people have watched. Yay! And I'll do a cartwheel down the house. This is what I mean. He keeps saying, well, the figures just keep growing. Well, Actually,
Yeah.
RTD, they won't go down. Well, they will for YouTubers because we always have that, don't we?
The
But not
the figures are so great and the reaction is so spectacular that they still feel compelled to withhold the audience appreciation figures for the first time ever. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and actually, you see, this is what I mean. You get a whole group of fans together, and suddenly a lot of sense comes out. Over the Overseer, the interactions between the Third Doctor and Bilal, and with the aliens and the Curse of Peldon, shows the right way to broach the subject of racism. Exactly, because
There
I
you
saw
go.
that was Sarah's face when she met Bilal, and actually, when the Doctor got back, he was a bit
Mhm.
angsty with Bilal. And of course, then Sarah said, "No, he's all right. Don't judge a book by its cover." Um, exactly. And that's all a kid needs. You don't need to kind of, right, let's sit down. That's a black person and that's a white person. White people are very evil. Oh, honestly, tell a story, can you please?
Yeah.
So here,
Lee Smith, you're exactly right. RTD is a raging delusional egomaniac. I totally agree with that.
so on the ratings, darling, we have a show that is getting over 6 million viewers, and it's still
No,
it's still growing.
no.
Oh no,
It's still growing because what is it? 28 days or 79 days or
yeah,
112 days,
100 days, yeah.
whatever it is there. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I know this is classic, isn't it? That's great. I can't believe that 21 million viewers aren't watching. Where
We can.
and he says
Yeah.
that's my problem. It's a big problem. There's a lot of people not watching.
Could that be RTD because you told people that this show wasn't for them, that it wasn't, they were seeking a new audience, that they should go out and your cohort told them to touch grass? Is that part of the reason maybe that these 60 million people aren't watching?
But isn't this fascinating that when he goes on about the young people and how they grab them and everybody at the BBC's happy, and yes, it's on one of our slides in a minute because he repeats that. He does mention that not everybody in the UK is watching. But I think the bigger point that they seem to be gaslighting and just distracting us from saying is 1 million people between Space Babies and Empire of Death dropped out.
Yep.
Now, you can say that you're happy that the audience is still growing, because it statistically will. You can say that we've got the under 30s, but why did you lose 1 million people? Is anyone going to ask that question?
Or another great question, in addition to that, is I would go, Russell, clearly there's enough other success stories on the BBC, such as the Post Office miniseries, whatever, to show that if the BBC produces an appealing product that people really want to see, they will seek it out right away and watch it like the night of or within 24 hours. If they're producing something that people are just dying to see, they're not going to wait 28 days to do it.
No.
And so it's all just massive. He says, I want 60 million people watching, so I will never rest until that happens. Well, I guess then you're never going to get any rest, Russell.
Yeah, but it sounds so worthy. The last paragraph here, folks. This is when I start. I mean, remember, my thumbnail, my advert for tonight was all about the Doctor's identity crisis, and am I watching the same program as everybody else? I think it's an enormously good series. I think we've made episodes that echo. Oh, hello, echo. Things like 73 yards you possibly think about for the rest of your life. I'm trying to blank it out. We've done an episode based on a pun on the word bogies. Yeah, we noticed that, which I think is hilarious. Oh, I know. We laughed. We laughed. I'm amazed the telly's not been smashed in. 5-year-olds watching that are just hooting with laughter, going, do you think that's for me?
I said at the time when we were reviewing 7 to 3 yards, when we did our review show for 7 to 3 yards, that I thought that was a crime against storytelling. I thought that was probably one of the worst written shows I've ever seen. It just abandoned all of the storytelling responsibilities that any writer should have for putting a TV product together. If he is so delusional as to think that people are going to be thinking about 7 to 3 yards for the rest of their life, I mean, I don't know. It's like, I don't know what universe that he's in. And the fact that he says he thinks it's hilarious that they made an episode about puns on the word bogey. Now, this is also the guy who thought it was hilarious that he thinks that the Mavity gravity thing, the reason that it's staying is because it made him laugh. And he said he thought, the quote from the part one of the interview where he's talking about Mavity,
Yeah,
he says his quote was, "In the end, it's immensely creative. That's what's brilliant." So the fact that he, for some reason, thinks that the Mavity gravity thing is brilliant, but what all that shows is that his main interest is pleasing himself and not the audience.
I thought that. I've got the Mavity quote. I'll show it later. But it's ego, because he said all the creatives are having to adapt to Mavity. Yeah, exactly. Everything.
Why is he so, Brendan? Why is he so, seriously? Why is he so focused on 5 years old? Is that because of the Disney thing? Even Disney wouldn't say that their sole audience is 5-year-olds. Disney knows you have to appeal to a wide range of audience.
He's obsessed since 2005 with saying 8-year-old. We've gone from 8-year-old now to 5-year-old. So we seem to be regressing. We, on our stream, as you know, we talk about this a lot, and fans think this. We know they do, which is you pitch over the kids. So the dads and the mums still I mean, it's like watching a pantomime. You've got the adult jokes, and then you've got the story for the kids. You've got all the different levels going on. But if you pitch at 5-year-olds, and by the way, folks, I'll show you the slide. It's not me saying it. RTD did say. If you pitch at 5-year-olds, there's which 5-year-olds? Hello, there's 2 teachers in the room here. Which 5-year-olds? The genius ones or the ones who are a little bit behind? Who are you pitching at? There's no kind of, measure. So if you aim at 5-year-olds, you're probably going to pitch it too low. You normally pitch a bit higher. I have to say, I wasn't even 8 when I watched Genesis of the Daleks. That's my go-to with this argument. I'm sorry, but Space Babies compared to Genesis of the Daleks, something tells me production values have gone down, writing quality's gone down, and actually it's a disrespect for the audience.
It is.
So there you go, folks. 73 yards you're still talking about, aren't you? All of you. I know you write to me all the time about 73 yards. So there you go.
And then also, about 73 yards, he had a quote in one of the other parts of the interview. And his quote was, "It doesn't remotely bother me that the woman in 73 yards doesn't get fully explained." He says, "I know what's going on."
Yeah.
He says, "And it's clear what's going on." He says, "Let people be talking about it for years to come." So again, he's more interested in his mind in being the subject of people's conversations, as if that's going to happen, than in fulfilling his primary responsibility of producing a coherent narrative for his audience. He actually wears this as a badge of honor.
Well, John Yulden, good to see you.
Hey, John.
Yeah. If he lowers the age anymore, the big baddies will be the Teletubbies and I mean, we're going to have to, you had that episode Inside the Dalek. We might have to go inside the womb at this rate.
At what point does this, how low do the ratings have to get, Brandon, for them to move the show off BBC One and kick it to CBeebies?
Can you imagine if they did that? Oh my God, it would be a disaster, wouldn't it? So we continue with this, looking at the identity crisis and the heart of the matter of what the problem is here. Now, everybody notice this. This is not me and Gary saying this. This is RTD.
Yep.
What he set out to do, and I don't quite know how we did it. Well, you should. I came back to it with 2 very simple intentions: to make it good. How was that going? But I wanted it simpler and I wanted it younger. Oh my, as simple as that. So that explains everything, folks.
Now the follow-up question, and I don't know if it was asked or not. It wasn't in the printed interview, so maybe it wasn't asked. My question, had I been the interviewer, my follow-up question would have been why?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Why the drive to make the stories more simplistic, make them appealing mostly to 5-year-olds, which means that, the older audience or like intelligent 12-year-olds or whatever, you're going to lose. I would be curious as to like why he believes. I mean, was it mandated, from BBC, Disney? I mean, I'd be curious about why he thinks this.
But this, I have a theory, Gary. I really do, because I've called it the hearts of the matter. What is going on here? Why is he saying this? So you asked the question. My speculative answer is it's quicker to do. He has been. You look at all the redrafts in the writer's tale. I was very impressed with RTD1. He would do a yellow draft and a blue draft, and he was somebody who kept. And I have to say, anything you write, I write. Oh, rewriting and editing is the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
So I was impressed. But you don't hear any of that talk now. But if you make it for 5-year-olds, if you make it simplistic, then it's, I have to say, easier. And if you never have to explain anything, it's even easier still. Now, he knew he had a task on his hands, that he has no new ideas, and he's just been given this amazing job again. And I think he's gone gods, he's gone simple, he's gone babyish. And if he says that's what he's doing, all of us are silenced, because if it's for 5-year-olds, well, okay.
And again, I have to say, I mean, cheers to the chat who I think have honed in on what it really is. And we haven't mentioned it so much, but questions like this obviously point to, in my mind, an inescapable conclusion, which others in the chat, have mentioned. I don't know if we want to kind of get into that, but basically it's like Occam's razor. It's like the most obvious reason of why certain things are done is probably true. And I just happen to agree with the conclusions that are being drawn in the chat.
Yeah, and I've resisted it again because, I've got no evidence. I can speculate so far, but to speculate about people's intentions, especially if they're a bit sinister. But we have seen the conclusions, and I have to say all roads are leading in one direction, aren't they? And yes, Dalek Eye, you're spot on with that question, and the answer would lead us into some dodgy territory, wouldn't it? Which is, if it is for 5-year-olds, why are we dealing with such unsettled issues? The CAS report in Britain would say under 18, no. Let's leave the kids just work it out to a degree, yeah. And
Paul Richards is exactly right. Where in that one screening, I think one of the early episodes, they were all on stage talking about it, and RTD, proudly proclaimed, you got it exact right there. You got to get the message to children young. I mean, he proclaimed that on stage. And it's like, if people, again, if people are telling you, what's going on and telling you why they're do some certain things, believe them.
Yeah. I mean, and if I was still in schools, I would be arguing against this. I would, but I was teaching secondary school, so it's more problematic in some ways because we go right up to 18. Yes, Atherstone 55, you're spot on. Now, Raymond Williams, I like what you're doing tonight, because you're taking it back to classic era and going, oh, come on. There is no way I understood Mind of Evil or the Demons as a kid, but I loved them. I wouldn't see either of them again for 25 years. I remembered some scenes. Now that's having an impact. Whereas, are you daring Raymond Williams to say you're comparing the Mind of Evil and the impact on you as a little kid to actually the final scene in Dot and Bubble? Are you sure?
Do you think we'll be, Brendan, do you think that there'll be people 25 years from now talking about, their beloved memories of Space Babies and how they remember that 25 years on?
I can't. Well, a lot of us who have watched the series, we haven't cancelled it. I would struggle to. I've watched The Devil's Chord's first minute again just to see how it starts. When we went into that break in the fourth wall, which we mentioned again tonight, the theme tune being played, and you just think, no, there wasn't a chance I could give that. No, so I struggled to look again. Now, Devil's Chord, I've just led to. That was an accidental segue. I knew it was coming in a way, but here, there's some. Now, this is RTD saying this. They are some astonishingly simple stories. In other words, you could write them quickly. The devil's card is the Doctor beats evil God, fights them, and wins.
That's not even true. He got beaten, and it was the cosplay Beatles that had to play the piano and win. The Doctor didn't fight them and win. The Doctor himself lost. He was a weak character who not only ran away from Jinx Monsoon, but started crying and then got his butt kicked in the final fight. So I don't know what he's on about there.
And he did
excuse me.
He ran away. They had a dance at the end. The TARDIS did a musical burp. That's basically it. Rogue, it's the Doctor meets somebody he loves and loses them and defeats some birds along the way.
All right, point of order. Love, please. I mean, maybe I part of me wants to be presumptuous and say I have no doubt that is in RTD's mind what love is. But the Doctor was not in love with Rogue. RTD turned the Doctor, let's be honest, into a sex hound for that episode. Love had nothing to do with it. Lust. But again, maybe Russell's definition is much more different than what mine is.
Yeah, and I've had to teach sex education, so I've got skin in the game. That was lust. That was lust. And lust can lead, well, we all know, we're all humans, but it's not the same thing.
But see, he's trying to romanticize it. He's trying to make it seem like the show is now the same as it's always been. The way that he describes these stories, it's romantic, it's almost lyrical, the way that he describes it, because maybe you know what? Who knows? Brendan, maybe that's the way that he actually reviews. I mean, he's divorced from reality, I think, in a lot of ways. So maybe this is the way that he does view these stories.
Well, I'm starting to think, and I've been down Canal Street in Manchester, but I'm starting to think this is what you're doing. We've all seen Crew as Folk, probably, where he depicted in the 90s the gay scene where basically it was one night stands and everything. So the way he's described Rogue there is really, it's not love, it's lust, it's one night stands, it's transitory. That's what he's describing there, which is a Canal Street one-nighter.
Yeah.
But that's not what you teach 5-year-olds.
Well, you and I might say that. Russell might have a different answer.
I know. How dare I? I was only teaching secondary school kids who found all this problematic enough. On his I must teach you simple Doctor Who, he then says 73 yards, which, as you know, is echoing through history, which is possibly as mystical and deep and strange as you could possibly get. It's very simple because, as he says, it's the same story told many, many different ways.
Well, that describes this whole season, the same story told many different ways.
But Gary, he says that in the article, doesn't he? He actually says, I could only do, because he was asked about, would you do more than 8 episodes? And as you know, he said, well, you can only have Susan Twist in 7. You couldn't do it for longer. You couldn't have missed it. He basically said, I can't keep, it would have started looking tired. Now, he continues about 73 yards here. There's not actually many plot twists in it, I tell you. In fact, it's the same story told over and over. What 73 yards does is it goes through different genres. I think I called it a mess. It takes that woman and puts her in a Welsh folk horror pub. I like that bit. Yeah. Then she goes into a unit story. Yeah, we moved. Then she goes into a political story. And then we all give up, basically.
What is that 80 years? I don't know what he's talking about there, because clearly he doesn't think the show's been on 80 years. I don't know what he meant by that last part.
Is it the 73 yards that she was an 80-year-old woman in that
hospital bed? Okay. Yep. All right. Yeah. See, I've tried to blank a lot of that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you have. Now, Raymond Williams, hello. I tell you, we've got new people in the thread tonight. I'm going to come to some of them. Jamie Tron.
All of your comments have been great. We're looking at them, even though we're just talking to each other. But yeah, you guys are making fantastic points in the chat.
RTD doesn't have children, and it shows young kids don't understand the concept of messaging. And there's Raymond Williams, a father. It needs to grab their. You see, this is the other thing. RTD's preaching, like the BBC and Disney seem to want to do now, but there's an awful lot of parents who that's their prime job, which is to teach and educate. And it shouldn't be the TV screen that starts to tell 5-year-olds, have you ever thought you might be trans? Have you ever thought? No. And I wouldn't want my 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old watching the Doctor Who Rogue episode and seeing a flighty hero who nearly kills his through neglect, his companion. Why would I want my kid to watch stuff like that?
Well, and we've made the point on past kind of, Sunday shows before, and that some people on the panel that, RTD has no interest in the traditional hero model. It's all about deconstructing the heroes. It's about making, in this case, the male hero weak, needy, over emotional. It's about attacking, the concept of aspirational heroes.
Yeah. Over the overseer, yeah. Things have developed. I suppose as a writer, everybody would over decades. So I suppose that's granted. It's just, where do you develop to? Russell did the same with It's a Sin. Do you think he's adverse to showing mature and romantic gay relationships? The trouble is, I've always had an issue with Hollywood and most people. If you had a gay character, they always died of AIDS, didn't they? I mean, as a kid growing up in the closet, it was frightening as hell because every gay character died. So to answer your question in another way, yeah, I look, Captain Jack, all those characters, they're all flighty, aren't they? I mean, flirty, and it's all aesthetics. Oh, you're beautiful, you're beautiful. What about the inner soul? If you're teaching kids to have mental resilience in Doctor Who, if that really is what you're trying to do, can you try and make all the characters not so judgmental on looks, not so judgmental on skin color? Because surely it's the deeper person we're trying to judge on. We never get there. So when you say over the overseer, where's the big romantic gay relationships? Then, yeah, you're not going to get them because it's all flighty, which is actually, as I said, it's Canal Street on speed. It's not. And anyway, we all know this, but shall we say it again? The Doctor shouldn't be getting bogged down in emotional romantic relationships either. Mr. Myroko, even if RTD does not have ill intent, it sure doesn't look good. Oh, it looks very problematic. We've all asked questions about this over time, I'm sure. Jamie Tron, good to see you. I bet RTD thought he was so clever and hip and down with the kids with the cosplaying birds.
Why did Brendan, let me ask you, how many, again, I mean, so many times as I was reading this interview, I would think to myself, based on his answers, okay, I'm going to be presumptuous and think that let's say that what was published in this 3-part interview that we've been looking at the quotes on were the only questions that were asked, right?
Yeah.
Let's go with that just for a minute. Then what that tells me is that the interviewer had a list of set questions that they were going to ask. There was no reacting in the moment to what he was saying, like responding like a back and forth, because what he was saying in most cases was just so problematic and brought up a number of questions. I
almost think, Gary,
when he's talking about what I brought that up to me was that talking about the 5-year-olds, I would go, okay, if you want simple stories that are targeted to 5-year-olds, right? I would say, Russell, how many 5-year-olds have any knowledge of what Bridgerton is?
Very good point.
Right? It's like, Russell, be consistent. If you're focusing and targeting everything for 5-year-olds, what is this obsession with Bridgerton? How does that even fit? It doesn't. But I mean, I wouldn't be allowed to ask a question like that. I would think, Brendan, chances are if you or I had been in the interview, this interview wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes, much less 3 issues.
No, because we
both would have got kicked out.
Because the other thing nowadays in 2024 in liberal democracies is you're not allowed to ask difficult questions. Now we're coming to some tasty stuff. Yeah, really. This tweet came out, didn't it, from the BBC itself, and it was a photograph, but it had a caption. So I'll show you the photograph, everybody. I'm sure you've seen it. Oh, isn't that sweet? Isn't that romantic? Isn't that lovely? 2 fellas.
Every 5-year-old's dream.
Is this Doctor? I mean, you have to say to yourself, because we're getting a bit used to it, even though we've challenged it. This is Doctor Who nowadays. You might have had John Pertwee sat with Joe Grant talking, about LARTEP and Plans of the Daleks.
That's right.
You might have had a lovely moment between the Second Doctor and Victoria in Tomb of the Cybermen. But now we go here. And the caption, dancing on the ceiling or maybe more. This is for 5-year-olds. This is for 8-year-olds. This is for 12-year-olds. Remember, schools have to normally show their sex education policy and lessons to parents, and that's in secondary school. Meanwhile, the BBC are saying a show that's for under 10s has two fellas here dancing on the ceiling or maybe more. I mean, what did you think when you saw that?
I gotta confess, my mind kind of closes off just when I see a picture like this with the classic 70s Doctor Who logo on it. I know this came with a quote, which we'll probably be analyzing in a minute, but yeah, this is not, I mean, to have the 70s Doctor Who logo there, it's almost kind of like false advertising, because this has nothing to do with Doctor Who.
No, this is now starting to. I think you're quite right. And again, in sort of my conversations, I almost block out the Doctor Who logo. But as I think we were saying the other day on our stream, the classic diamond logo is now being poisoned by this. You know, it seemed
Absolutely.
It seemed to be great to see it come back, but now we've come so far.
It's a bait and switch. I mean, Brendan, you remember the day that classic logo was introduced as, here's our logo for the show. Everyone on social media was rapturous. It's like, oh my God, that means that it's going to be just like it was back in the 70s. We're going to have the types of stories and it's going to be just like it was. That turned out to be as big of bait and switch as RTD being announced, and everybody thought that it was going to be the glory days of 2005 all over again. It's all just been a massive bait and switch.
So at the heart of the matter, since that's the name of my little program here, Gary, what is, remember, we're now 2 or 3 months after the season's finished. We're in the dead season, really. What is the reason for showing that photograph with that caption? Because it doesn't even sum up Rogue. It doesn't sum up the episode, which is apparently about cosplay and aliens. It doesn't sum up, it's not even Bridgerton. What is that photograph doing? What is it all about? Because as we've said, it's certainly not Doctor Who, and it's certainly not getting me excited for the Christmas episode. Why show that now?
Well, but you said it a moment ago. They want to establish in people's mind, the message of the advertising is, this is Doctor Who. Doctor Who, the logo Doctor Who, BBC Doctor Who, as that logo says, is this now. That is that's what it is now. Like it or leave it. And as RTD says in the SFX interview, he says, you know, what was his exact quote? I loved it so much I wrote it down. He says, if you don't like it, good luck to you, because there's going to be a lot more of it.
And
so,
also, Gary, can we say that photograph there of two fellas, that's not my issue, two fellas, two characters in Doctor Who, one is the hero, laying there looking as though either they've just done something, they're about to do something, and there's even a nudge, nudge, wink, wink in the caption. But the photograph we're not being shown is, if this is a story about life and death, if this is about good and evil, and a young 19-year-old girl was nearly going to be murdered while he was doing that. So while that photograph is trying to do whatever it wants about how great the Doctor is and lovey-dovey or whatever, he was having a grin, having a moment with a fella, while a 19-year-old girl he picked up was probably getting murdered.
Yeah, I said at the time during our review of this episode that in my personal opinion, I thought this episode is the line that once crossed, you can't uncross. You can't cross back from. There's no coming back from this episode. I saw a comment online, I think in on Facebook today, and somebody's it wasn't in the context of Rogue, but it was reacting to about, you know, Doctor Who. And I said, well, you know, basically it kind of irredeemably, you know, ruined the character of the Doctor.
Yeah.
And the comment was along the lines of, well, no, every Doctor's different. He says, maybe that's just this Doctor. Yeah. No, presumably if RTD is taking such pains to say this is the same show, which he does in the SFX article in the context of Sutek, he says the reason that he brought Sutek back was to prove to everybody that, no, it's the same show. It's the same show. Well, if it's the same show, Russell, then this Doctor has to act fundamentally consistently with all of his other incarnations, which this episode, I think, shattered that illusion. So, and that's what it comes down to. The marketing and the promotion and all the comments is so absolutely schizophrenic in terms of, saying who this audience is for, what the show is anymore. One day it's for everybody. The other day, the next day it's not.
But you see,
it's like you have no idea what it's all for anymore.
and we're going to show you in a minute. Hang around, folks, because we're going to show you more from this article where he talks about the Rogue episode and why the writer got it and all the rest of it. Oh, there's some tasty bits coming. But just before I get there, Dalek Eye, there are some fantastic comments tonight, I have to say.
Yeah.
Remember when gay characters on TV were deemed too stereotyped by the gay community? And now we have Gatwa, the most gay doctor. And so to say, I have to say, as a gay man, I think this is a bad personification and a bad projection of gay life in 2024. It makes us all look as though we're predatory. It makes us look as though we're all fickle. It makes us all look as though we're all into ourselves, self-indulgent, vain. Really, is this? This is not what I want gay to be seen as in this progressive 2024 time. Progressive, no way.
Yeah.
Over the Overseas, if Russell had created a brand new show about a time-traveling sex tourist, Rogue would have been perfectly fine. But it's not Doctor Who. And how many times have fans, not just even on our stream, but fans are thinking it, you are just distorting the show beyond its remit, beyond the template, beyond its DNA. You are really changing it. And this is what I mean. And you're an expert on this with Star Trek and everything else, where franchises are getting ambushed now, aren't they? And distorted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that part of I think that there's also a mission which includes like Star Wars, Star Trek, to undermine and destroy cultural touchstones that provide a valuable service not only to society, but everybody needs heroes and things they can kind of depend on. And part of it is them taking sledgehammers and kind of like reducing that to rubble. That makes society more malleable for them if all of these touchstones have been ruined, if we don't have them to look to anymore.
And you know what? The trans debate with Star Beast, we're not going there again today, as in I've got nothing new to say. But what I have thought about since is that wasn't our first moment of the trans debate, because RTD has been playing around in that way. When you look back at his first era, if you look at New Earth, there's a moment when they body swap, and David Tennant is Lady Cassandra. And we get all this strange acting going on, which at the time I think was supposed to be comedy. But you look at it now and you're going, this gender fluidity thing, and I've got balls now, and all that stuff going on. And he hasn't done it only once; he's done it again. It's gone out of my head. There's another episode where you have the gender swap again. If you think of the Dr. Donna, we've got a bit of nonsense there with, this is what a man feels like. And honestly, it seems like we're playing around. Like, this isn't a mature discussion of trans issues. This is kind of just gender swapping, as if it's something you do in the morning when you just decide what you're going to wear. It's like Destiny of the Daleks, the Romana regeneration nonsense all over again. So I promised it. Here we go. I'll go big screen so people can see it first. It's on the left. Well, the left is the new stuff and the right is SFX magazine from the first issue, the first of the 3 installments.
Right.
So we've got Russell Davies has revealed. Oh, isn't it great as a Doctor Who fan to learn new stuff? Oh, what's he going to tell me? That Rogue came about by way of an apology. During a Zoom call, he talked to some executives that he was not pleased with the portrayal of bisexuality in Loki, which creator Kate Herron found out about. I was so embarrassed, said Russell Davies, and I apologized to her profusely after she explained that it suited the surreal nature of the show. He offered Herron the chance to write the episode as an apology, which he immediately decided would be a gay love story. So we now know why we see that photograph We now know why we saw what we saw that now cannot be unseen. It's because RTD opened his gob, slagged off somebody else's work, and felt really bad. So he's given a whole episode, and obviously let her have carte blanche. And on the right is our Scream of the Schalke, when of course in Rogue again. Was Rogue the episode when he just wanted to help out people and make himself feel good? Remember Paul Cornell? And he said, I just wanted to do a favor. It was a really nice thing to do for a friend, to actually have the Richard E. Grant doctor in there in that scan sequence. Do you know what? And earlier in our thread, and I said I'd come to it, didn't I, Gary? That when sorry, I forgot who it was now who said it's like a cronyism going on. And where's the auditions?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I don't know about cronyism, because cronyism requires more than one person. All of this shows is that RTD, and he is reveling in it. The show is now his own personal playground. He can do whatever he wants. He has bragged before about he's never getting any pushback. He can now do, call up somebody and do favors, for friends, because he thinks it might be fun, even though it makes no sense within the context of the canon of the show. We got probably the worst episode of Doctor Who ever, Rogue, because RTD made an embarrassing mistake, and instead of just saying sorry and being like a normal adult, I guess he internalized that so much, and he felt so bad that he says, you know what, I feel so bad that I'm going to allow you to write this as an apology. Now, if that's not a disqualifier for anybody who's like a serious producer of television, and I know that that's probably not the worst thing that goes on in Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood, we could probably talk about like the shocking ways that Hollywood runs all day, but this is just an example of just the kind of almost adolescent way in which the show is run. I mean, I would say that it's like shocking, but I mean, I don't think anything RTD says
but doesn't it
shock
reveal
me anymore.
Here's my question at the heart of the matter of what I'm seeing in front of me. Another way of looking at it is this. With Boom, remember, he said, I trust Stephen Moffat to come up with an idea, and I just said yes to one of them. I think he was given a choice, and he went, yeah, that one. In other words, even though it was only an 8-episode season, there was a story that had no link with anything else, and I'm fine with that. Then with this one, which was given to her as an apology, again, so for 25% of this season, he had no idea where he was going to go. Now, compare that to season 1 in 2005, when he had a template, didn't he? For, I'm going to go into the past, I'm going to go into the future, I'm going to show this, I'm going to show that. And there was a little season arc, and there you go. And actually, it worked really well with Chris Eccleston that season. But remember, he showed that to the BBC and said, I'm going to show that it's time machine, and it's also it travels in space. I'm going to show the range of monsters you can face, and I'm going to show this. And he had it all set up. In this season, he goes, Stephen Moffat, is there anything you fancy writing about? Yeah, do that one. Kate Herron, I'm so apologetic. I'm sorry about that. Do you want to write a story? What, a gay character? Yeah, go on. He seems to have no idea what he wants Doctor Who to look like. So therefore, free reign. Is Kate Herron a science fiction expert? Has she written a lot of sci-fi before? I know it says Loki there. I don't know much about Loki, but I haven't heard anything that makes me want to watch it.
And I know that this is the writer phrasing where he says he offered Herron the chance to make the episode, which she immediately decided would be. So it was totally up to her. So he said, I feel so bad. I'm going to let you do whatever you want. And whatever you want is what we're going to film.
Yeah, because he...
Where is that? Really? Wow.
Yeah, and this is Gary, because he criticized Loki. How many seasons has that gone? How old?
I never watched Loki.
Right. I'm assuming Loki is a couple, 2-3 years old.
I think it was 2 seasons.
So a 2-season possible franchise is compared to a 61-year-old program that has dominated the world, sci-fi and everything, and is in people's consciousness. And he was saying, sorry, go on, do what you want with this massive franchise. Wow.
You know, what it should be is that, you know, I offered her the chance to pitch
Yeah.
what she'd do. She pitched me a gay love story, and I said, well, that's not the character of the Doctor. What other ideas do you have?
Yeah. Do some
In a
research.
perfect world, that would have been the reaction, but apparently not here.
Gary, I thought when we went for jobs, has it changed? I don't know. When you go for jobs, don't you normally do research on the company and you kind of, so you know what you're talking about? And so it's not like you're coming up with empty kind of phrases as if you've just read them off something. Aren't you supposed to know your stuff? Whereas it looks as though she didn't know what the hell Doctor Who was.
You know what? I would really, here's what if I could sit down for 5 minutes with what's her name, Kate Herron, I would say, Kate, what was her reaction when the guy who's producing one of the biggest franchises in the world, first of all, what did you think about getting a job because he made an embarrassing comment for you? Have you ever gotten jobs before because the producer, you know, made a boneheaded comment? And then my second question would be, did he give you any guidance, or did he just say that you can write whatever you want, even if it doesn't fit within the context of the show, and we'll do it? I want to know the details for this about what kind of free reign she was given.
Yeah.
You know, it's astonishing.
Now, Over the Overseer is helping us out here. Loki is a very sophisticated sci-fi show. It makes current Doctor Who look pathetic by comparison, which raises the other question over the Overseer. So why did she write it? Was she told to write it down? If she can write better and sophisticated, why did she deliver what she delivered? The other thing, though, Gary.
Oh, one last, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to, before I forget, back to this whole 5-year-old thing. When she said that Kate Herron, again, what I would ask her, immediately decided it would be a gay love story, I would say, well, you do know that he wants the target audience for this to be 5-year-olds. How does that fit to make a gay love story in a series where the producer had said his target audience was 5-year-olds? I would go, what's that about? And then I would just let her try to justify it.
Yeah, and we want things simple. He said he wants things simple. Now, adding sexuality is not keeping things simple. You just normally just have somebody's in peril and all the rest of it. But the other thing I wanted to say, Gary, is when he says that he did this out of an apology because he criticized what she did in her show, right?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't like criticism. When he realized he'd ballsed up, when he realized she would not like him or, you know, would be unhappy with him, that's a very quiet criticism is coming. He can't deal with it. He's a job.
Well,
he's a job.
Like I said, I mean, we could psychoanalyze RTD all day and we'd probably be right. But again, I mean, it fits.
Right. Well, let's keep this baby moving. I did say, and you saw my thumbnail, it wasn't just Ncuti. Matt Smith, our lovely Matt Smith, was up there. Now, Matt Smith has had a go. What is this about Doctor Who at the moment? I am trying to love this program. I'm trying to stick with it. Okay, a lot of us have tried to park the present era. Some have said 2017 onwards.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's people who are trying to compartmentalize and slice Doctor Who up into the bits that they can cope with. So Matt Smith, then I've got Sylvester McCoy tonight. David Tennant, as you know, is going on about trans issues. What is it about all the actors are just getting in on the game? So Matt Smith here, people that attack Doctor Who blow my mind. I mean, that's the headline. Has expressed confusion towards those who attack Doctor Who on the culture war grounds. By the way, it's Doctor Who is being changed by the culture wars and the culture warriors. That's what's happening here. Anyway, I still don't get this. And I've done this in one of the early saloons and I still have seen no evidence. Can somebody point to me, email me and show me the evidence? Because that first paragraph says, as the first black man to play the role, Gatwa has faced racist abuse since his casting was announced. While some viewers have also turned on the show for its inclusion of LGBTQ themes. Now, Captain Jack didn't seem to be a problem in the first era. I don't, you know, I in fact, to be honest, it had a gay kiss in it and nobody seemed, the press didn't even make a big thing of it. So I'm not quite, where's the evidence of this? I am aware.
See, I mean, there's probably, again, I mean, nobody, if you were asked, just as you asked people to point you to the quote unquote racist abuse, All this is Radio Times is front loading the support for Gatwa and implying that if you don't like the show, then that means you're racist or you're anti, you know, LGBT. Something's wrong with you if you don't like the show as it's being presented now. That's the implication of the way that they're phrasing it. They're making you, their intention is to make any reader who doesn't go along with what's being done to the show now the villain, basically. Something's wrong with them. They've got to be fixed.
This is when you see a bigger game, because obviously in the UK at the moment we've had, if you have an opinion on some big national issues like immigration, stuff like that, we are being gaslit that means you might be racist or far right. Now, Barry Stroud is saying what I'm thinking, which is, I really admired Matt Smith for keeping out of it, and now he's just blooming. And there's another slide that he goes further into it.
Well, I haven't. Okay, you're going to go on with the quotes. I've got to admit, I don't really have a foreknowledge about what Matt Smith was going to say here. I'm curious to see whether he's talking. I mean, what was his foreknowledge in answering these questions? Basically, because if the Radio Times was come up to him and said something like, well, why do you think, people, have said they hate the show now because Ncuti Gatwa was black, or whatever the way they phrase it. I'm curious if he's reacting to that, or if he actually has a full understanding about why. Does he even know the episode Rogue exists and that people think that that's a violation of the character? Again, I mean, how separated is he now from what's actually currently happening with Doctor Who?
I mean, he's played some fantastic parts, as you know, and he's played gay characters. He's experimented with his career, and I have applauded him on that. Christopher and His Kind was a good drama, for example. When he played Christopher Isherwood in the Berlin period of the 1930s. But when I look at that first paragraph, I'm thinking, this is the gaslighting you get nowadays. When instead of saying, oh, there's a lot of people unhappy about immigration, we'll just call them racists, and then they're put back in their box. People are criticizing Doctor Who. Well, we won't deal with that. What we'll say is they're all homophobes or they're all racists. It's the same game. Unfortunately, as you've just seen season 1 Doctor Who, and as I watch the political spheres play out in America and Britain, I'm starting to see that there's a big pattern here, that anybody who is anyone who criticizes is put into a dangerous box to shut us up. I have not heard anyone why would anybody be racist about this? I haven't.
Brendan, this is just
you've got Idris Elba, you've got Luther. I mean, it's no issue.
Look, the Radio Times, which in many ways is just the mouthpiece of the BBC, they need writing like this, in support of what the show is now, is just a way for them to maintain the illusion of their moral superiority. Yeah. Like they're more culturally enlightened and socially elevated because they believe this. And again, the critics, and therefore making the critics seems like there's no foundation at all to there's no legitimacy to their criticism. Any criticism is based in racism or in, exclusion. I mean, writing like this, seeks to deny the legitimacy of any kind of criticism whatsoever.
Yeah, so I'll show you the slide that really does it. So Smith explained that he couldn't fathom why certain people have chosen to take such aggressive stances on the show. Now, that's different to saying people are racist, isn't it? But we can be critical of going, what the hell are you doing to Doctor Who? I don't recognize it. Now, is that aggressive? I don't know. Now, here we go. Those debates reduce it to a place that it doesn't need to be in. People that attack Doctor Who blow my mind. It's about an alien who's cool and travels around the universe saving civilizations. Yeah, but Matt Smith, I agree with you. So why is RTD not writing that?
Again, I mean, God love Matt Smith. I mean, for me, his run, the 11 Amy and Rory, is my pinnacle of New Who. And so God love Matt Smith. But this the way that he is saying this leads me to believe that either what he's being asked or how it's, the question being presented to him isn't taking into account really the full issue of what's going on. It seems like he's that's a really general reaction. It's like Doctor Who should be, why is anybody criticizing Doctor Who? And then, like, if you or I were there, we go, well, Matt, here's Doctor Who now is this, 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 and this. And he might go, oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he seems to be, I don't know what he was asked, what the question was to this answer. But
and as David Mullen says, and
yeah,
we're trying.
I agree, David. Hello,
Gary,
David, by the way.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Yes. As Gary is trying to do, which is we're trying to find a context for this, because I think Matt Smith is a decent bloke. And still is. Of course he is. He still is. And he's, because of what he's played in his career, I know he wants, he wants to give representation and all the rest of it. He's a brave actor. So David Mullen, Smith probably hasn't watched the series much since he left it. And I believe you, because he's a busy man.
I would agree.
The trouble is, the golden rule tends to be, I know he's the Doctor forever, because of course, once you've played the Doctor, you're in. So you'll be asked about Doctor Who forever. The trouble is, if you don't know what you're talking about, it's always a dangerous game, whatever the subject, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, this was probably just an offhand answer to a question that was phrased very carefully in order to elicit this kind of answer. But I agree with David. I mean, what's the current show that he's on? I don't watch it, but I'm blanking.
House of Dragon?
House of the Dragon. I don't think that, I mean, probably the schedule for that show is such that he doesn't have a time to take a break and watch Rogue or Space Babies.
No, and I have to say, I am in my core a Doctor Who fan, but I watched House of the Dragon and I enjoyed it. And my own Doctor Who series. So it's interesting, isn't it? Now, so we don't know why he said that. So I jump around again. The thing is, people are criticizing what's going on because we're pushing back on the whole DNA of the show being changed just with a wand. I mean, J.K. Rowling won't change the Harry Potter franchise.
Yeah, good for her.
She will stick to some of the rules. Every story, every world built in fiction has to apply certain rules. And it's just that we are kicking back on some of the rules are going out the window. Now, this one, if I just remember where we are here, a little bit more on the emotional Doctor. This is from the first SFX one. Oh no, sorry, I apologize. This is the last one of the SFX one. How has the season 1 experience been for you? So I say to the thread now, give us a like hike, but also tell us your answer. Give us it in a sentence. How has the season 1 experience been for you, thread? Because this is what he says. He's delighted. None of us have worked at this level of budget before. None of us have worked with Disney before. We've all learned a lot, and we're all delighted with the way it's worked out. I'm genuinely, got to say, we're very lucky. To see them fall in love with Doctor Who over the process of making these episodes has been lovely. And I mean it. They've done that. They liked it to begin with. They literally love it now at the end of this process. It's been lovely working with them, as Love's doing a lot of hard work here.
Brendan, just listening to him talk or reading his quotes just honestly just makes me feel tired all over. I mean, it just is exhausting, even just to all of his comments about everything is very lucky. And Disney apparently, who are so in love with the show that they still won't tell us what the ratings are. They're that much in love with it, which is interesting. I guess that they've never worked with this level of budget before, I guess. And at one point he says something like, they have an increased budget and Sutek deserved an increased budget. So what, like a more expensive CGI computer program? That's what gave us Sutek, because Sutek deserved the higher budget.
Yeah.
It just, I mean, again, if I'm trying not to be snide here. If he either he is just, he can't help spouting this kind of promotional BS no matter what, even after hard rating numbers are in, that he can't help it, or he honestly believes this and he's just like existing in some kind of condition that's just divorced from reality. I honestly don't know.
Well, the answers to the question I did ask. Paul Richards, the season one experience has been atrocious. Plots that make no sense, and a doctor acting like a horny teenager. Utter crap. Over the Overseer, season one has left me feeling deflated and leaves me with no hope for the future. Darren Dalby, the budget is great. The storyline and scripts aren't. Budget isn't everything. And we Doctor Who fans know that pretty well. Lee Smith, it's an obscene waste of money and potential to make fantastic Doctor Who. Do you know what? Budget or not, there are so many stories you can do with Doctor Who. And isn't it amazing that in the classic era, you could have a base under siege done in so many different ways, and it never got boring. It's mad. It's mad. So there you go.
Well, I'm very curious, Brendan. What would be your one-word answer to that question? How has the season one experience? If you were to say that in 1 or 2 words, what would your answer be?
I think the thing, if I'm going to stick to one word quickly off the top of my head, disconnecting. I feel as though I am disconnecting from the program I have always loved. And it
was a disconnecting experience. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel as though I am moving away. I've always watched you know, come on, I'm talking to Doctor Who fans. You know, when you have sometimes you that doctor's not really your doctor, or the style of it's not quite right, or the story isn't. But your love of the program shines through and you stick with it. But I am finding gut punch after gut punch after gut punch, and I'm thinking, gosh, how much of this do you take before you're stupid? You know,
yeah.
Why do you watch something that you just? Me and Jamie, for the first time ever, for Space Babies, Devil's Code, and a couple of others, were just shouting at the telly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not entertainment.
No, I agree with you. By the way, my one-word answer to that question, how's the experience been for me overall? I would say excruciating.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why we're shouting at the telly. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we'll soon run out of new stuff here, but RTD, having seen Ncuti's audition, having seen his work, having met him and talked to him, there's just all a Ncuti energy that comes through. And this doctor does say and do things that, when you refer to him being more emotional, that's actually quite a new fundamental spine in this doctor. Where did I start this show? Has the doctor got an identity crisis? When was the doctor emotional? The doctor, it's all on one hand. You know, in Pyramids of Mars, he shouts at Sarah. You know, there's that moment. And actually, he puts her in a place, because in Pyramids of Mars, he takes her and he says, listen, if you're going to kick off, basically, this is what I'm dealing with. So back in your box. You know, the doctor does sometimes go, hold on a minute, while you're doing your little human emotion, can I just show you the whole of the universe is at stake here? So, shh. Meanwhile, we've now got this emotional spine of the doctor. In other words, he's going to be fickle, transitory, you know, fads. And so we've got this nonsense. But it just goes on, the beautiful language he uses. It's a character who has very famously hidden his emotions for a long time. Yeah, very famously, because we got on with Adventures, which you still... Can you imagine William Hartnell in The Daleks? When, as you know, that was a whole a hatchet job by him to make sure they went into the city. You know, he ambushed his own target.
All of this begs the question, and I'm sure that the interviewer, even if they did want to ask, knew they probably couldn't ask this. All of this begs the question. If the doctor is now this, and you're extolling all of these new ways that the doctor is being, I would say then, how would you account for the decades-long popularity of the character in the show when he wasn't like this?
Yeah.
I mean, RTD is acting like he's come up with, you know, the magic formula to give a new life to the show. But I don't think anybody's asking him, well, then if it's so different, then why is it, if the old way was so popular and worked for decades, what made you think that this way would work?
But you see, Gary, in a way, there's an attempt to answering your question right near the bottom there. So I'll come back to you, RP. You're probably not aware of that yourself, but you do. And it's wonderful. It feels like a whole new tapestry, a whole new canvas to play on. It makes it richer, deeper, and more lovely. This is Doctor Who. So basically, as I said earlier on, he's got no new ideas, but having an emotional doctor gives him an out to suddenly just do any old stuff. And to say it's for 5-year-olds, and to say he's got an emotional doctor, that's amazing creativity. And so it's a new tapestry for him.
Well, okay, that to me, and I think I remember saying this a while back on one of the Sunday shows. What this tells me is that RTD has no interest in writing the show that he's supposed to be writing.
Yeah. Creative boredom. That's the problem. Creative boredom. Oh God, I've been offered the Doctor Who job. I'd love to get control of it, get control of the kiddies and how they can think in the future and change all their values to be very progressive. But I've got no new ideas. I'll have gods. I'll do it like Teletubbies, and we'll have. Oh gosh, we've just auditioned this actor who cries all the time. Yep, we'll have it.
This whole season, honestly, has been, to me, it's been first draft.
Yes.
Fanfic.
Yeah, which is all disaster. Even John Nathan Turner would have turned this up. So RP, sorry, you were getting with William Hartnell. He didn't mind showing his emotions, but mainly what he felt was irritation. Yeah, the Doctor showed character. He had to show character, but we didn't getting bogged down. I like my example was in the Daleks. He put them all in danger, didn't he? Because he wanted to be curious about this city. Can you imagine when he had radiation sickness and they all did, and Ian's still got his paralyzed legs and they're in that Dalek cell? You know, can you imagine him being the 15th Doctor? He'd have had to go, he'd have nutted the wall maybe, and he'd have said, I'm sorry, this is all my fault. Please don't hate me. I did this. You know how, because that's the 2024 version, which is basically saying, yeah, I'm at fault, but don't you dare criticize me. I'm going to throw it back at you lot. Don't you dare criticize me. I was doing this for a reason. Now, you know, and you, in the end, the victims aren't allowed to be the victims. You change it around. But the first Doctor just got old and struggled and all the rest of it. But we didn't have all that nonsense. In the Cave of Skulls in An Unearthly Child, which I know you've seen recently as well on John Yulden's channel, Sci-Fi Chronicles 79, he had put them, well, they landed accidentally, didn't they? But the point is the Doctor just wanted to get them off the planet. He wasn't exactly...
Well, I mean, we have to bear in mind that, I mean, those first three stories, the Unearthly Child, the Daleks, and the Edge of Destruction, those 13 episodes. The first Doctor that we came to know after that, in those 13 episodes, he's very much the anti-hero. And it says the result of those three stories, at the end of that, you know, his character, the relationship between him and his companions and how he treats them and even how he acts fundamentally shifts. So I think that you have to kind of see the those first three stories as the kind of genesis of the Doctor that, you know, we come to know and love during the rest of the Hartnell era, and you know, not indicative of what his overall character was, you know, in every story.
Although it was when it was now we mentioned Mavity earlier, just so everybody's got the it's just so the evidence is there. We don't need to talk about it again.
No, of course.
But yeah, the you know, if you want to look at that later, you can get a screenshot.
No, actually, I think, Brendan, I actually think it would be very enlightening. Go ahead and read that. Go ahead and read that first graph and then perform the action that it ends with.
So Mavity is not resolved. It's permanent. It's absolutely permanent, darling. That's what gravity is. It's funny. It's very funny. And it makes me laugh. And it's staying. It's enormous.
Bangs the desk. And it's like, basically, in other words, I have spoken.
Yes. All the comic strip people are having to do it. All the novel people are having to do it. This is the ego bit, isn't it? How funny is that? Now, that's not funny. I don't know what sitcom version or comedian. what's funny about everybody linked with Doctor Who has to change how they write it because of your little decision that you won't explain.
He's God in his own mind. He's
They
the
say,
God. He's the God of his own mind.
yeah. And that's where I think we're allowed to say it's ego, because he's finding it funny that everybody has to do what his little thought.
Everybody dances to his tune. That's
Yeah.
his perfect life.
So that's Mavity for you. I won't explain it, but everybody has to do it.
Yep.
And of course, he said at the bottom there, he said, having built entire plots out of puns. We've gone to that level. JNT got criticized for so many things. And yet we've now got in 2024, when it's big budget, there's millions of pounds involved, and we're going global. And the franchise is well and truly established now, and it doesn't have Michael Grade trying to attack it. So it's in a stronger position in one way. And now he wants to write a whole story out of puns. What level is that? So there you go. From the horse's mouth, as they say. Now,
well, some part of the horse.
Yeah. Just to remind everybody, we've got, breaking the fourth wall. And again, on the lack of explanation front, that first paragraph there, he says, I'm never going to explain it, frankly. It's very interesting within the Doctor Who officers. In other words, his colleagues at Bad Wolf.
Yeah, who will never cross him.
Yeah, we know exactly why we break the fourth wall, and yet I'm showing no sign of putting that on screen. How dare you? So basically, you can't be bothered to put it into the script.
But here's the most telling, and I think if you want to know how RTD operates, Brendan, read that first sentence of the second paragraph right under where it says the Star Beast.
But I see no need to explain it whatsoever.
Boom. That is RTD in a nutshell.
Now, he said he's writing it for 5-year-olds, but I have to say, in a lot of these interviews, doesn't he, Gary? He always mentions his sister. I'm not aware that she's 5 or 8 or 12, but he keeps saying, it's good enough for my sister. If it's good enough for my sister, it's good enough for you lot. It's like, hold on a minute. Your sister's just supporting you because she's your sister. Honestly, it's there's a madness going on here.
Well,
now,
okay, then he says there's something arch about the whole show. I think it's a program you can very happily turn toward the audience. Now, my follow-up question would be then, why didn't you do that then during your first run?
Oh yeah, you
if it's so great and such a great television tradition, and it fits within the context of this show, which apparently you think it does, why didn't you do it before? Well, we know why.
So here we go. I know you'll be running blind here, but in the Radio Times, and of course, as David Mullen noticed, the context could be, that these actors are just caught on the fly. Yeah. But this one was different. It was from the BFI for the Happiness Patrol. And of course, the Happiness Patrol, we think, is about a South American kind of regime. It had that vibe to it, didn't it? So anyway, Sylvester, so Matt Smith's had a go. David Tennant's had a go. Ncuti's had a go. RTD's had a go. And now our lovely Sylvester's in on it. Now, he's not having a go at us, but he's kind of distorting what I thought Doctor Who was. And so, yet again, my question about the identity crisis. So here he says, and I'll go big to help Gary out as well if he hasn't seen it. Doctor Who has always been political. Now, we all know people will tell us a certain story. They'll waffle on about the Green Death or whatever. Now, let's just go a bit further because he doesn't mean that. If you do drama without any purpose, then it disappears into the ether and it's just bubblegum. So every drama,
season 1. Basically.
So every drama has to have power, which is the message. And that means it has to have some political debate going on in it. Otherwise, what else is it about, really? It's about people's struggles against something, or they're trying to make something of their lives and something comes against you.
I think that may be true for particular kinds of drama. Not every kind of drama. What about like a mystery, like a murder mystery? What's the political core of that people need to wrestle with?
But
so, I mean, God.
The thing is, Gary, and I think we said it before we started our show, and we're always aware that we need to save it for the show, but we were saying, weren't we, that in this case, we've got actors who they're trying to join a certain agenda that's going on at the moment. And, the politics, he says political. And actually, when I read that, his definition of politics, it's just about people. It's about a person has a problem. There's a person who's an opponent. There's a person who's an antagonist and a protagonist. It's just called drama. But he's put the word political in because, as you know, at the moment, that's the big virtue to be selling.
Well, okay, the show's politics. First of all, anybody who says the show's always been political and then they immediately cite Green Death, my reaction is, okay, name me 2 other stories then that fall into that. I guarantee you they will not be able to, because it's a parroted line that they think that allows them, oh, Green Death, Green Death, Green Death. I guarantee you that's not anybody who has any kind of deep knowledge of the show. As far as what Sylvester is saying here, if you were to ask him, well, what specifically? And he would probably say, well, the Daleks, it's about Nazism, isn't it? I would say, okay, leaving the Daleks aside, what other examples of the shows? Again, he probably wouldn't be able to. These are knee-jerk, one example reactions that people think will satisfy any pushback.
So just to help you out, I mean, it doesn't say much more because
it's maddening. It is absolutely maddening.
Oh, it's a shame because we don't want classic Who to get touched in the same way. But anyway, addressing how the show's storytelling can incorporate a political slant, he said, in the 60s, I got hooked on Doctor Who, and the reason why was because of the politics in it, subtly put there. The 60s, they started to swing, they started to change. It was kind of a revolution, a peaceful and wonderful revolution going on. And Doctor Who was the only decent thing on the BBC at the time that had anything that talked to young people like me in a political way.
Again, I think, honestly, I love Sylvester, but to me, all this is just blather unless he can produce all this generality is something that, you could read a current article, say, what's the correct thing to say? Give me some examples to back up your point. This, to me, honestly, all due respect, much due respect to Sylvester McCoy, all of this to me is just blather unless he backs it up with specific examples.
Yeah, good point. David Mullen, the moral struggle. McCoy confuses this basic drama point with politics. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Protagonist, antagonist, complicated.
Exactly.
The two are completely different things, though. Most drama is about right versus wrong. It's nothing political. But as you can see, David Mullen, what I'm trying to say is it seems to be actors now to get, I think, noticed, have to jump on a certain platform. And so therefore he uses the adjective political. It's not the version we're thinking of. And I don't
in our Malcolm Hulk show, we talked a little bit about this before the show. In our Malcolm Hulk show, we talked about that his definition of politics was, and it was in a comment to a question. So he says, all your stories are political. He says, well, my definition of politics is just the relationships of people. One person relating to another was his. There you go. Go back, and anybody who hasn't watched this, that was a great series of streams. Please go back and watch that. Brendan did a great job with those. But again, everybody thinks that, saying that Doctor Who was always about one political ideology versus another, which is kind of what in current day we think about politics, one extreme outlook versus another extreme outlook. And they say, well, Doctor Who was always like that. But, again, shy of more than examples other than the Green Death and the Daleks, thank you very much.
And of course, the other thing about it is that while they do that, the present way of writing politics, as we've seen in season 1, is from one stance only. Chibnall's was the same, one stance only. But you quoted Malcolm Hulke, and when we had Michael Herbert on, his biographer, who's again on with us on Sunday, because we're going to do politics in classic Who and really look at it, not just Malcolm Hulke's, but we're going to test Sylvester's theory. So basically, when you think about that, Malcolm Hulke always said, even the baddie, think of an Invasion of the Dinosaurs. Who was it, Gary? One of the scientists, and he had the scar on his face. He'd been in a fire. He saved a kid from a fire.
Oh yeah, that was in the book, but not in the show.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't think of it. He was the blonde-haired.
Yeah, it was Martin Jarvis's character.
Martin Jarvis's character, yes.
And so basically, Malcolm Hulke was always trying to say, it's never as simple as you are totally evil, you are totally good. He wanted to show shades of grey. It's the human race, after all. Now, can you imagine saying that now? I mean, 5-year-olds need no shades of grey, really. Let's be honest, 5-year-olds. 8-year-olds onwards, you start to show it's a bit complicated life, and not everybody is a baddie like in a pantomime or a Grimm's fairy stories. And this is the point.
I think you could have stories like, for example, you could have a story like The Dominators, which was kind of a comment on the pacifism. You know, the Dominators were coming in and dominating the kind of pacifistic character. So there was a comment, and again, at the time, that was the late 60s with the peace movement going on and everything. And you could say, well, that was an undertone to that story. That would count kind of as a political story. But, you know, again, I don't know that I could watch, you know, like, you know, the macro terror or the gunfighters and think that was political.
Yeah, well, like Richard Brown is saying, and we could play this game. If McCoy is talking about the 60s, which one is it? The Chase, highly political. The Space Museum. The Sensorites, which obviously our program, the Sensory, was based on, which was partly because you had, I'm trying to remember the character, you had the one with the sash. I know you've joked on your program about the
one stash.
Yeah, the one sash. But the but there was one who was like, it was like a council, wasn't it? And he was the higher Sensorite. That was it, basically. And it was based on Socrates and Plato. It was just based on that kind of Greek element of democracy. And we like to, you know, we like the idea of the sense sphere as well. And that's why we called our channel what we did. But it wasn't political. That was about just governing.
But again, all of these come, not so much, I think, Matt Smith's, whatever the context of that, his comment was, and Sylvester McCoy here. I think that maybe not so much them, but definitely everybody online who becomes like a rabid advocate for an apologist for RTD. That's because they need to justify, it's a way of justifying all of the, you know, warping of the show that RTD is doing now by saying it's always been that way. That's their justification to support whatever RTD is doing now.
Now, Rob Fellows, I mean, people are joining us all the time. The message is that every minute minute thing is now political. Amy and Rory getting married would be called political. Bill working in a canteen would be called political. Davros existing, political. And this is what I mean. It's just trying to stretch a point. Paul Richards, classic, had brilliant stories, and now the stories are so bad, the message is patronizing. But yeah, let's play the game for a second, everybody. 60s, McCoy is talking about. We can't mention the Daleks because I think that's a given. But what other big stories in the 60s? The Tomb of the Cybermen. You said the Macro Terror, the Space Pirates. The War Games, you could say, was like it was skit on the generals. But Wilford.
I mean, I have to think that what he's talking about is he's saying, and who knows, maybe he's conflating things in his mind. I don't know. But it seems to me the tone of what he's saying is that Doctor Who stories in the 60s were underpinned by political viewpoints that either drove the story or underpinned the story. Political viewpoints in the sense that we refer to politics now. And honestly, I'm at a loss. Like I said, I mean, if at a stretch, you could say maybe the Dominators, the Daleks is too easy of a go-to answer.
Yeah.
I mean, the Cybermen, for example, Kit Pedler was more a reaction to, you know, the fact that mankind was becoming too reliant on technology and the over-mechanization of society. That was a definite viewpoint. I don't know that I would consider that necessarily a political viewpoint in the way that we're talking about.
But some of the big hitting, you know, if you talk about the 60s, now I wasn't in the 60s regarding watching it, but basically people talk about the Monsters season under Troughton. They were just monster. I mean, most of that is not political. It's just scare the kids and get them behind the sofa. That's what that game was about.
I mean, I guess you could say what Web of Fear, the message was don't use the subway.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could try to, you know, scramble around and find something in everything. I mean, you know, Fury from the Deep. What? don't pollute the oceans. I don't know.
Well, that's what I mean. There might be. So David Mullen, you could argue the 60s historicals were political. Modern series historicals, not so much. I'm just thinking David Mullen and actually John Yulden and Gary's on there, Sci-Fi Chronicles 79. On there, they're reviewing from the beginning. So you're still on season 1, aren't you? But if you look at the historicals then, like the Reign of Terror is your latest one, for example. When you look at those, what you're not going to get is the revisionist stuff that you get now, which is, if you did a British Empire story now or a French Empire story now, you can imagine the angle. Whereas then you could see there were protagonists and antagonists. You can see, they were being pulled around and all.
Well, as you just said, though, Brendan, every foundation of drama is to have an antagonist and a protagonist. Whether that antagonist is a human or a system or a robot or the protagonist's own demons, whatever. You need to have that that kind of counter
tension
going on. That's basically just the foundational structure of drama.
Yeah.
So potentially you could, I guess, if you stretch, you could interpret every story that features a protagonist against some kind of opposing force, whatever that might be, is political, because you could say, well, the protagonist represents the individual. And now, for example, The Prisoner, Patrick McGowan's, classic story, The Prisoner, was obviously political. It was designed to be political. And most of those stories, they wears the allegories on their sleeve. It's so surface about mankind, man versus the system, the struggle to maintain your own individuality against conformist culture. That whole show was political, but Doctor Who never, I think, had that level of the same kind of inbred politics.
Well, our friends in the thread, old expert Doctor Who fans, Paul Richards says the Reb planet very allegorical. Parasite draining the land and controlling the inhabitants, colonization, but it wasn't signposted. It's there if you want to see it. Daryl Joyce, good to see you. His artwork is right behind me now. And Daryl, thank you very much. I'm going to say it out loud again. So can I just show it?
Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
And of course, on John's channel, Sci-Fi Chronicles, the thumbnails are Daryl Joyce's
gorgeous stuff.
But if I can just take, I don't want to ruin your work, Daryl. Well, I've ruined it a little bit with puppets on it, but there's the Sensorite set. You can imagine, everybody, why I said to Daryl Joyce, whose book I've got, and I know there's another one.
Yeah, me too. It's great.
I mean, and it's beautiful. And I'm enjoying your tweets at the moment, Daryl. When you do a little kind of poll, and I like tasty, like the rock robot and stuff like that. But look at that Sensorite set. I love it. I know I'm the Sensphere, but I love the color. I have to say, I love the fact that there's a lot of foreground, so I can actually play around with it for various things. I've got a Sensorite at the window, honestly. But there, Daryl Joyce's work, everybody.
And absolutely, no, it's beautiful. There's even the TARDIS that is only 4 feet away from everybody, and they still couldn't see the Sensorite removing the lock, even though they were standing about 3 feet away. But that's no dink on Daryl. No, that is a gorgeous piece of.
So now I've said that, Daryl, I know you've got a point to make as well. There's a bit of politics in the macro terror in relation to the community being urged to be happy and not question authority. It's like Happiness Patrol all over again. There is, but and isn't it funny, Daryl, that we've had stories like the Happiness Patrol and the macro terror on that very theme, and yet our culture nowadays seems to be almost indulge your unhappiness, indulge your angst, let it out, talk about it, get a group together.
I think whenever you're having, especially now, you're going to have your political discussion on Sunday. I think it's also very important that, and even with Sylvester McCoy, I would hope that the interviewer there at the beginning would define terms. I would have said to McCoy, let's start out with saying, what does the term politics mean to you?
Yeah.
because you need to get into the mind of the person if they're going to talk about how Doctor Who's always been political. Well, then everybody has a different, most people have differing ideas about what the term politics and political means. So you've got to define those terms, because it's not politics. The definition of the word politics is not like one size fits all.
No. And Madam McCam is trying. Is he mistaken social views,
Yes.
political views?
Yes.
Or just anything with a person in? Yeah. So, yeah, problematic. Now, last...
Oh, but also, could
Go
I
on.
have you put up Mad McCam's other
Last
comment
one.
about that starts out, no matter what? That's a great comment.
No matter what was meant to be political, the difference is the classics made you think. Modern tries to tell you what to think. And this is what I mean. The human race, if it's judged by this, we have regressed. We now need to be told what to think. And I have to say, nobody can defeat my example. How old was I? I'm going to get this right. It was 75, Genesis of the Daleks. So I was 6.
Yes.
So I was 6 watching Genesis of the Daleks, and it pitched much higher than me, but I loved it. And it rewarded on repeat watches, especially the album as well. Space Babies, which I know in the threads, Barry says, well, he had abortion and immigration were issues. There were issues in there, but they were thrown at you like hell. But
see, now again, you know, we're getting drivel, we're getting fed drivel like Space Babies or Rogue or the absolute drivel of, you know, Ruby's mom, where her insignificance is what gives her significance. That's just drivel.
Yeah.
You know, but it's being presented as, isn't this the most amazing thing ever?
Yeah. Davros was terrifying. Lee Smith agrees with me. You were a year younger, so you know the score when we saw the end of episode 1. Oh my God. Now, just before I come to this, which is my final slide, Darryl Joyce just comes back. It's not really about current politics. It's just about sci-fi often visits dystopian futures, agreed, where things are not as good as their first might appear. Well, we're based on H.G. Wells, aren't we? H.G. Wells, the Time Machine was about
the Morlocks and the Eloi.
Yeah, it was the Victorian class system. Yeah. And of course, it was a brilliant one, because the Morlocks, the working class who did all the blooming work, were the ones who ate just fattened up the upper classes, didn't they? So, yes.
Well, in this case, you had the Eloi were the persecuted. They were the beautiful people, but they were the persecuted ones.
Yes, the Morlocks were the working class and the Eloi were the upper class. It was Bridgerton.
Yeah.
It was Bridgerton. No. But
oh boy.
Oh, don't start. Anyway, last one. So this has been done in many streams, but I've not asked Gary's opinion. So the point is, you know, I just want to wrap it up. It was in the article, the SFX October magazine. Has there been any news on a renewal for season 3? Everybody knows the answer because you've seen it in all the various facets. It's an industry decision. Did you know that, Gary? It's like any business. These things take time. They're taking a long time. I think the decision will come after the transmission of season 2. That's what we're expecting. That's what we've always been heading towards.
Okay. All right. So, first of all, can we agree that if the numbers had been spectacular and either on par with what Disney was expecting, you know, based on the money that they sunk into this, or even higher above their expectations, that they would have been trumpeting this from the roof, and they would have immediately renewed it for season 3? How many shows get renewed? Like, if the first episode comes out gangbusters, it's getting a lot of great press, you get the renewal notice by the third week. You get the third by the third week.
Yeah.
It's been crickets. And as far as the whole coming after the transmission of season 2, Disney's deal of 26 episodes included the 3 60th anniversary shows, 2 Christmas specials, of which the upcoming one is the second, 2 8-episode seasons, and the 5-episode spinoff, which puts the kibosh on all this talk of, well, the fact that they announced a spinoff just shows how popular and solid the new no, it doesn't. It was always part of the initial package. So I think he's right. I think that we may not hear anything about it because they want to wait to see if the ratings for season 2, which I think are going to start where season 1 left off and go lower.
Yeah.
And the spinoff, which I don't think is really going to do anything. I think Disney's just waiting for like a confirmation that they shouldn't be sinking any more money into all of this. It's basically just a waste of money for them to be putting. And there's also out there, some sources that say, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just find it hard to. I'm not going to say that anybody who says that season 3 is not happening is wrong. Nobody knows. It hasn't been announced. I don't know. Brenda doesn't know. Nobody knows for sure. But I will say that I can't believe that, considering how much was it cost? It was $100 million. How much did Disney put into this? $100 million?
Something like that. Yeah, about 10
I can't see them saying, well, this is performed to the extent that we feel confident and glad that we can sink another $100 million into it. I just think that if it had done great, we would have gotten the AI numbers.
Yeah.
Disney would have said, hey, it's one of the top performers on our channel. Haven't heard any of that.
And we're not being shown evidence. I mean, yes, like you said, they won't show us the AI numbers. They won't show us various things, but they will just anecdotally say it's a big pitch it gets the under 30s and everybody's pleased. But that's just anecdotal. We're just dealing with facts. And like I said, it lost 1 million viewers in a season of only 8 episodes. Now, is nobody talking about that? No, gaslight. Show me that we've got some under 30s over there. But the main picture is you lost 1 million. But
now, if Disney comes up and some months from now, whatever, announces that they're not going to be financing season 3 and they're kicking it back to the BBC, I'm not really sure how they're going to spin that.
No, well, they've got time. They're buying time, aren't they, to come up with some PR strategy. The other thing is, as you were saying about any successful franchise out there, yes, straight away they're commissioned. We've seen it. We always see it. But in this case, you do wonder whether, like if Disney was sitting there going, gosh, we're on a hot property here. This is really doing well. And yes, as I've always said in my saloons, they might be holding back to make the BBC sweat for good negotiation practice.
Absolutely, possibly.
But if it is seen as a success, there's always a risk. And I said this when it was a San Diego Comic-Con, that when RTD and Bad Wolf are saying hello to Alex Kurtzman, another franchise, another person with money who could fund, Disney, if they haven't sealed the deal, could lose Doctor Who.
Please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that because we haven't heard anything yet, there's not going to be. I don't know. I am not saying that. I'm just saying that it's odd that if it's done so well, why haven't we seen like concrete thing? Who knows? Hollywood is so weird. Who knows? I mean, they could renew it just because it fits in with the Disney agenda.
Yeah.
And ratings be damned. Who knows? As John Yulden is fond of saying, and I agree with him, Disney, I think maybe just consider it content.
Yeah.
It's not a driver. It's not a showcase show for them. It's just become kind of content.
Streamers.
Maybe they just need content. I'm not saying that anybody who says there is a season 3, I'm not saying that's wrong either. I'm just saying, I don't know. I just find it odd that, we haven't heard about the normal things which would indicate that they consider it a success.
Well, we've got 2 ideas here. I'll bring David Mullins up in a minute. Mad McCam, I still think Disney may scoop it up as content, as you said, John Yulden said, and simply that. Streaming services need content, yes, and that is where I agree with John Yulden, and they can make it cheap. So here's a thought: RTD leaves, and it may be better discuss. The other thing, before I lose it, is David Mullins. This is very reminiscent of '96.
Yeah.
We waited, didn't we? Paul McGann's movie, and then we waited. What's America said? Are they going to take it up? And we waited and we waited, but knew by December Universal were not going to proceed any further. It's a sobering thought, I have to say. Mad McCam, imagine they'd do it on a budget with a good showrunner. Well, yeah. You're giving us lots of essay questions here, Mad McCam.
Well, and we're all talking about budget. Again, to me, budget is meaningless unless it all starts with a good story.
Yeah, and we haven't had them. I've got to be fair, we haven't had them. And Sutek sitting on the TARDIS and all that stuff. No, we've had soap opera, and that's that. Well, that was our debut pilot show, Gary. That was the hearts of the matter. I think we went right to the heart, and I think we almost did an operation. And
we went to the heart. We stuck the knife right in, gave it a good twist. There's always a twist at the end.
Oh God, we're not going to dance. We're not going to dance. So everybody, it's been a very lively thread. My God.
Yeah, thank you all to the chat. Everybody in the chat was just amazing. We were reading everything, and you guys are just the best.
This was going to be a cozy short show me and Gary were going to do, but you've kept it alive. And
but here's the thing though. That's kind of like saying I'm going to have a nice quiet dinner, and then you go eat a lot of like hot peppers and stuff, which just put your mouth on fire. When you're talking about, RTD and the kind of quotes and things we were talking about, it's hard to kind of have a nice mellow.
Yes. In a way, I got the content. We delivered on our thumbnail, but the trouble is I triggered everybody. But it's not me, is it? It's don't shoot the messenger. RTD, it's from his own mouth. Anyway, thank you, Gary, for your time tonight. I've really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. It's always a joy, to be on with you and with a great chat, and kind of seeing how much I can hold myself together when we're talking about things like this.
So if that's just got you salivating, on Sunday, which is probably my last live show before I go and get married and holidays and stuff, the truth is it's going to be on the politics. We're going to really test the theory of what Sylvester McCoy said. I've got Michael Herbert, the Malcolm Hulk biographer. I've got Simon Lydiard, the Scaro founder. I've got a few heavyweights. It's going to be a tasty one. The usual time, 7 p.m. on Sunday. So join us for that. But in the meantime, thank you, Gary. And of course,
you're very welcome. Thank you.
See you all again. Bye for now.